They don't need you the way you need them. And at some point, you feel it without anyone ever saying it out loud. Not in one big moment, not in something dramatic, but in small gaps that keep repeating. The pauses that stretch a little too long, the effort that feels slightly heavier on your side, and the way you reach out. Sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it just disappears into silence. And slowly, you start noticing something you didn't want to notice. You are more emotionally present in this connection than they are. Not always, not in every moment, but enough times that it starts shaping how you feel when you're in it. You reply quickly because you care, they reply when they have space. You think about them during your day, they think about you when it fits into theirs. You adjust, you wait, you understand, and you give everything meaning, so it doesn't feel one-sided. And without any clear decision, the balance slowly shifts into something quieter. Not into conflict, not into separation, but into uneven effort that both people slowly accept as normal. That's the part that messes with your head, because nothing is technically wrong. They're not cruel, you're not desperate, and there's no clear reason to leave. Just a growing awareness that you are more invested than they are. And once you see that, you start changing how you move. You begin analyzing everything, how long they take to respond, how much energy they return, and how often you're the one keeping things alive. And the more you notice it, the more you try to adjust yourself. You tell yourself to match their energy. Don't double text, don't over-explain, don't care too much. So you pull back slightly, trying to regain control over something that already feels off. But pulling back doesn't erase how you feel, it only hides it. You still care, you just become quieter about it. You still think about them, you just stop showing it. You still want connection, but you stop asking for it directly. And now you're stuck in a strange middle space, still emotionally invested, but externally controlled, still hopping, but acting like you're not. And that creates tension, not in the connection itself, but inside you, because you're constantly managing yourself instead of just being in it. Then something else starts happening quietly. You begin lowering your expectations, not because you want to, but because it feels easier than facing the imbalance. You call it being chill, you call it understanding, you call it maturity. But a lot of the time, it's just adaptation. You adjust to what you receive, so you don't have to fully face what you're not receiving. And over time, that becomes your normal without you realizing it. You stop asking for clarity, you stop expecting consistency, and you stop expressing what you actually need. Because somewhere along the way, needing too much started to feel like a problem. But need doesn't create imbalance, silence around it does. Because unspoken needs don't disappear, they turn into distance. And you start feeling that distance internally, before anything changes externally. You become more careful, more measured, more guarded, less open than you used to be. Not because you changed as a person, but because you learned what happens when you give more than you receive. And here's the part that hits hardest. You don't actually need constant attention, or validation every hour, or someone fully available all the time. What you want is simpler. To feel like your presence matters. To feel like you're chosen, not just tolerated. To feel like if you stopped showing up, something would actually shift. But when that feeling doesn't exist, your mind starts filling in the gaps. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I'm misreading it. Maybe this is just how people are. So you shrink your needs, just to make the situation easier to live in. And that's where the inner conflict begins. Because one part of you still wants more, but another part is trying to accept less. And neither side fully wins. So you live in compromise, not out loud but internally. You become someone who feels deeply but expresses lightly, someone who cares but tries not to show it, someone who stays connected but slowly detaches at the same time. And that's exhausting in a quiet way, because you're always splitting yourself in two. The version that feels everything, and the version that controls how much of it gets seen. And eventually, you start asking something you didn't want to ask. If I stopped trying this hard, would anything actually change? And deep down, you already know the answer. It wouldn't collapse, it wouldn't be chased, and it wouldn't suddenly become equal. It would just continue as it is. And that realization doesn't make you angry, it makes you clear. Because you finally understand something most people avoid accepting. They don't need you the way you need them. Not because you don't matter, not because you are replaceable, but because the emotional weight is not balanced the same on both sides. And once you see that clearly, you stop confusing effort with importance. You stop assuming closeness is mutual just because it exists. You start recognizing patterns instead of hopping for potential. And that recognition changes your behavior, not dramatically, not emotionally, but quietly. You stop overextending, you stop overexplaining, and you stop trying to be enough in places where you were never meant to be everything. And in that space, something uncomfortable but honest happens. You start seeing who stays present without being pulled, and who only shows up when you reach for them. And that tells you more than words ever could. Because connection is never proven by what someone says, but by what they naturally give without being asked. And when you finally understand that, you don't become cold. You become selective. Not guarded out of fear, but aware out of experience. And you stop trying to force equal energy from people who were never matching it in the first place. Because you realize something important. Peace doesn't come from making someone value you more. It comes from no longer ignoring when they don't.